Back in the early 1930s, a guy called Wilhelm Reich wrote a book called The Mass Psychology of Fascism, a book which explores how fascists came to power and explains their rise as a symptom of sexual repression. Well, I've been reading a bit of this book and I'd like to share some of the author's words with you now. So, quote, "The suppression of natural sexual gratification leads to various kinds of substitute gratifications. Natural aggression, for example, becomes brutal sadism, which then is an essential mass psychological factor in imperialistic wars. To take another example, the mass psychological effect of militarism is essentially libidinous. The sexual effect of a uniform and of rhythmically perfect parades, of military exhibitionism in general, are obvious to the average servant girl, even though they may not be obvious to learned political scientists. Political reaction, however, makes conscious use of these sexual interests. Not only does it create peacock-like uniforms for the men, it uses attractive women in its recruiting campaigns. One only has to remember the recruiting posters with texts like, "If you want to see the world, join the Royal Navy." The faraway world is represented by exotic women. Why are such posters effective? Because our youth, as a result of sexual suppression, is sex-starved. And again, quote, "Suppression of the natural sexuality in the child, particularly of its genital sexuality, makes the child apprehensive, shy, obedient, afraid of authority, good and adjusted in the authoritarian sense. It paralyzes the rebellious forces because any rebellion is laden with anxiety. It produces, by inhibiting sexual curiosity and sexual thinking in the child, a general inhibition of thinking and of critical faculties. In brief, the goal of sexual suppression is that of producing an individual who is adjusted to the authoritarian order and who will submit to it in spite of all misery and degradation. At first, the child has to submit to the structure of the authoritarian miniature state, the family. This makes it capable of later subordination to the general authoritarian system. The formation of the authoritarian structure takes place through anchoring of sexual inhibition and anxiety. And one more quote. The cry for freedom is a sign of suppression. It will never cease as long as man feels himself to be trapped. No matter how different the cries for freedom may be, at bottom they always express one and the same thing: the intolerableness of the organism's rigidity and the mechanical institutions of life, which are sharply at variance with the natural sensations of life. Not until man acknowledges that he is fundamentally an animal will he be able to create a genuine culture. End quote. This guy, Wilhelm Reich, the Nazis burnt his books, and then some years later the Americans burnt his books too. That's kind of scary, a supposedly civilized country like the United States burning books. But yeah, the book, The Mass Psychology of Fascism, it's available to read online. It's not hard to find. I've read various excerpts, and in my opinion, it's not an easy read. I think the guy was a Marxist who got kicked out of the Communist Party, actually. But I'm more interested in the things he said about sexual repression and its consequences than I am about his politics. If you type in Wilhelm Reich quotes into Google search or whatever, you'll see some of the things he wrote, some of the things he said in his various works over the years. I haven't as yet come across anything he said that I would deem to be particularly controversial. I certainly don't agree with a lot of the things he says, but his writings, his books, must have angered some powerful people, I would say. However, attempts to censor his work failed in the end, which is a good thing in my opinion. Anyway, until next time, folks, take care of yourselves. Good night.